So now we move to the St Albans Pavilion closeout report, item 12. So Darren, welcome to the table. Thank you for joining us. So we have this report that we can take as read.
Yes.
Are there any comments or particular areas that you wanted to highlight?
This is Kevin from my team, project manager for the project, and the surrounding. We also did the, it's not included here, but we also did the upgrade of the St Albans, the sports turf surfacing as well in conjunction with the new pavilion. The new pavilion is resilient. A lot of money was spent on piling to ensure that it's fit for future. It's got had a crime prevention through environmental design component to make sure that the toilets were very visible to the street in public. And it also is fully accessible compliant. So they're the key points. Take any questions?
All right, so
No.
Just focusing in on the finances, the overall budget shows a $20,394 surplus after all transactions were completed, returned to the programme, which on the face of it, all good. But then we look at the fact that there was a budget change of $335,160 because the original budget didn't meet replacement requirements or community expectations, and the project at that stage was seen as currently unfunded. How did we get to a point where we needed to almost double the budget for this project? Was there something that became apparent as we went through the project, or was it seriously undercooked, or what happened, why we needed to almost double the budget partway through?
So quite often the budgets we inherit are put in advance. So we started with that, began an exploration exercise with the community, did some ground investigations, and then got to the point where we knew. So in hindsight, I guess, we would have had the budget set properly in the start before we inherited it through a line item. I don't know whether you want to talk to that at all.
There's some commentary in the report around, the project as originally planned didn't meet the community's expectations or the community's need. And I mean, I guess, it's possible that some of that only became apparent once we got to engagement with the community on the particular project. I guess from my point of view, it would be how we avoid, on the face of it, a $300,000 increase isn't a huge amount in terms of council's overall budget, but if there's potential for that to happen with this project, then there's potential for it to happen with others, which could have higher headline budgets, and therefore the impact could be far greater.
So the good news is this is a very old project. We opened it almost 2 years ago to the day.
Yep.
And we always have a lessons learned part in here. So we've taken on board all of that for future planning and any other toilet facilities or any other project we do as well. So my team have delivered several hundred projects over the last decade, I suppose, and we build on all of that institutional knowledge and findings to ensure that future budgets, when they're set, are fit for purpose.
Yep, and this of course leads to confidence in figures that we're looking at for the capital programme in the LTP.
Very much so.
Because if we're going to run a proper prioritisation process around project and costings, we need to know that those are accurate. So it's good to hear that every time something like this happens, that's then built into future processes to avoid repeats or to try to avoid repeats of that same
it's
thing.
a continuous improvement loop to make sure that when we start a project, we've got a greater degree of accuracy in terms of understanding what the total outturn cost would be.
Indeed. Thank you. Okay. Any questions on this report? Yanni.
Thanks. Just related to the question that's been made, in terms of the change request, did that come back in front of us at a governance level for approval?
That's dealt with via an internal management, so we take change requests through to ELT where they're reviewed and or endorsed or sent back through again. So
I find it really interesting. I think probably a lesson learned is we need to get some consistent process. We spend time in this chamber arguing about $10,000 or $20,000. We struggle to get things in terms of some local projects around resilience or sustainability for very small amounts of money compared to this. And I just wonder whether we need to think about if things are going to be changed, we make a formal resolution at this table, or we have some understanding of why we don't. But given what we hear through annual plan, where people are asking for much smaller amounts of money than this, for it just to be changed, I find kind of interesting.
So there must be a level of change at which it would require a council resolution.
Well, this is part of a program, and I guess that's been the agility of this program to deliver within an overall total agreed amount. So as we've heard previously through other reports, the surplus goes back in, and so we're managing the total program within a total out-turn cost budget here. The number of change requests, I think, and Dave may know better, but the number of total change requests that transact through this organisation weekly and monthly would be a significant number, and they are dealt with via through the management structure.
Yeah, I don't think there's any suggestion that we should have the ability to make decisions on every one of those, because some of them will be very minor. This whole question of moving budgets around within programmes of work without governance involvement is something that has been talked about before, and it might be something that we need to pick up as part of the LTP discussions in terms of how the programmes of work are defined and ring-fenced, because some of those programmes of work are very large and very broad, and then we might want to pick up essentially the issue that Yanni has raised, which is at what level, at what quantum, or at what percentage of a budget possibly we might express it, is there a desire for there to be governance involvement rather than it being simply a staff decision. So I think there are it certainly picks up some matters that have been raised previously, and the LTP is almost certainly the right place to begin to resolve them. But thanks for the answer to the question. Yanni, was there anything else?
I just didn't quite understand around the procurement and city care, but the contract valuation, quite a significant variation as well. In terms of like the actual budget and the amount that we spend on the contract versus all the other stuff, you know, I'm just looking through, so a contract of about 477,000 plus another 55, so 532. This is just on page 105.
Yep.
Do we have a kind of some sort of benchmark around how much we spend non-contract? Like, I guess I'm just interested in why there's so much that's spent in the non-contracted part of the budget.
Fees as a percentage of construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some market averages that we typically work to, and they'll be different for every project. This one, that's why we wanted to split it.
Yeah. This particular one had some different issues in terms of the stability of the site, which is why the previous facility failed. So in terms of geotech and various other work to make the building resilient, there was probably a slightly higher cost up front.
We were essentially building on what someone referred to as a bowl of cold gravy.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you. Melanie.
Following on from what you said, Andrew, where in the LTP process would this come up? Because I'm looking at the schedule, and does it come under capital delivery, which is a 15-minute section on the 4th of November? I mean, how do you fit that?
We will need to build it into the programme. It's certainly a discussion that we want to have, and we'll need to build it into the programme.
I'd do that around when we do the prioritisation on capital. We can talk about the policy in that way.
All right. So Dawn's been making notes. It'll be picked up, but we'll certainly make sure we build it into the process. Aaron.
Yeah, just when I was looking at the this size, I was trying to get the square meterage, which was hard because when you blow up that thing, because it's a scan, it goes fuzzy. What was the square meterage of the building?
20 odd metres by 10, so it's close to 200 square metres, I think.
Approximately, we'll say approximately 200 square metres, and you're going to convert the total.
Big chunk of that's veranda space though, isn't it?
Yeah. You're not going to see the square metre rate reflected because a lot of the money was spent, and you'll see in the ground. So this site being the bowl of cold gravy, a lot of those square metre costs were in the ground, not the above ground facility.
Right. So going forward, for everywhere else around the city, we've got to build in gravy. Should we not be coming up with a lightweight building design that kind of sits on top and
we took the advice.
Float your boat. Climate change, they can just keep rising.
Took the advice of the engineering on this, both geotech and structural, and this was a recommended solution. So that's what we went with.
Yeah, because it's
not rib raft. It's not slab on grade. Well, sorry. This is the engineering solution that was specific to this site, and it's
the particular site with St Albans Park and the surrounding area, this building sitting on 36 piles down approximately 3 metres to 4 metres to a gravel layer. That's common for most of the residential housing all around that area. You'll find just about every residential house is sitting on a number of piles as well, almost to the same depth. There's a gravel layer around 3.5 metres deep.
So is that not over-engineering for a toilet block?
It's the only way of... the previous building failed. It's sunk anything up to about 300 mils at one end during the earthquake and broke the back of or the floor of the building in half. There had been one in addition done to it previously that sat on some piles that basically stayed level, but the rest of the building dropped down. So when we looked at the construction of the slab to support the building, we looked at various options. One of them was to put a lighter weight foundation in that you could then come back later and jack the building up. That's proved to not be all that palatable in terms of if you jack the building up, then you've also got to change all your flooring and everything else inside. So the best outcome was to put it on the piles and know that we were down on solid bearing and know that we had the resilience in the building to see us through another event.
Right, another 300-year event. Right.
So it's quite
changing rooms.
It's quite clear from the answers to the questions that a number of options were considered. Engineering advice was sought and absolutely taken into account as we would want, and that resulted in this particular design. I don't think it's our job here to second guess the advice that might have come from the engineers, and I expect that we would want our staff in building any facility to take the advice of the engineers rather than doing something different.
Well, given that this is a finance committee, my fear is, Mr Chair, with the sheer number of change facilities, toilet blocks, park facilities, halls and stuff across the city that we need and have to replace, that the pure cost of some of these now is just unaffordable. So we either have to slash back the sheer number we have or come up with other solutions for putting stuff in place, you know, and my ward's just as guilty. We're getting $1 million toilet. So, I mean, it's over $1 million, it's 1.2. Yep. So
I'm not even going to start...
I invite everyone to come and use it to get your money's worth. But
I won't even start talking about the price of some toilet blocks that were built in the past on Banks Peninsula. But yeah.
So we need better solutions. We just cannot afford to keep building these. And I realise in the timeline of things that this one's gone through, and that's fine, but going forward, we have to have better solutions. We cannot afford it. So
all of this needs to land as part of those LTP discussions, absolutely.
Or we end up with like 4 sports grounds with super facilities and none others, and you queue up to play.
Indeed. Sarah?
And we can just check and see actually how many there are left to go. Because I don't, like the earthquake repair program I think is pretty much done.
It certainly is, yeah.
Yep, indeed. I mean, the other thing that you would take into account as part of what Aaron's talking about is location. You know, do we need to build back a facility in exactly the same place it was before, or is there some firmer ground that would support a different and possibly cheaper foundation solution, for example?
My point is, if we own 1,000 facilities and they have a 50-year life, it's you're doing 20 a year, and if the cost is 10 times what it was, you know, 30 years ago, then.
And so that's a matter for the renewals programme and the LTP. You've certainly asked some questions on this particular project, which is the right thing to do as a closeout. You're raising some matters that we would quite rightly want to apply as we consider the renewals programme and how we do things for the LTP.
Yeah, and Mr Chair, they're not criticisms, they're asking questions so we got our house in order going forward, because they're learning lessons, that's what these are.
Constructive, yep, absolutely. So Pauline and then Tim. Pauline.
Second. It's a noting paper.
Okay, so Pauline moves and James seconds. And Tim, you've got a question?
Not so much a question, it's just following on from Aaron's. I mean, you've said that this is really at the end of the earthquake repairs, which is fantastic, and your team have done an outstanding job, I have to say. But the question raised by Aaron with regards to the ongoing cost if we are going to replace these venues, you know, we've got communities that are being infilled, so therefore the parks have more pressure. So it's not about just earthquake repairs, it's also about how communities can look at these facilities and make them work. Yanni and I have been working with a community that have been wanting to put containers on to make it work. So I think there has to be a conversation at some stage about thinking outside the box.
So it's good that this report has given rise to a discussion that we can pick up as part of the LTP development. Well, the LTP development is in front of us and we've got every opportunity to do it. So it needs to be articulated at the right time in that process. All right, so this has been moved by Pauline and seconded by James. Is there any... Yanni, this is a further question? The discussion. Right, okay, so there is some discussion. Yanni.
Thank you. Look, I really appreciate getting these closeout reports. I do think there's a number of lessons that we can learn from these projects. I mean, I think probably one of the key takeaways from this one is project scope at the start and having proper QS rather than just having a line item in the budget. I appreciate it's a program of work, but I do think the point that Councillor Kewen's making through his questioning is really relevant. Like, if we're building a lot of these facilities, are we ensuring that we're getting a common approach to the cost, and can we do it in a more cost-effective way? But having said that, I just wanted to acknowledge your staff, Darren, you and your team, because we're coming up to 10 years from the first earthquake tomorrow. There's been a huge amount of community facilities that we have actually put back. There's been hugely challenging issues with insurance, assessment, and a lot of aftershocks through that period as well. So I just wanted to personally just acknowledge the work of you and your team, and I think it's a fantastic thing when you reflect back to how many facilities we have had repaired or renewed for our city going forward. So thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yes, certainly adding to what Yanni has said, I remember as chair of the Communities Housing and Economic Development Committee in the 2013 term of council, seems a very long time ago now. We had a report used to come to us there, which was the Community Facilities Rebuild Programme. And that report used to take up a sizable part of our agenda. This was in the days of paper agendas, and it used to be significantly thick, and it was very detailed. And there were a lot of facilities that formed part of that programme, many of which were badly damaged, many of which were complex and complicated, many of which were also heritage facilities with particular complications as well. So it has been a huge programme of work. We saw that report get smaller and smaller through that particular term, and we've actually got to a position now where any further work has just been amalgamated with other programmes. But yeah, certainly echoing Yanni's points, it's been a huge amount of work been done, and I think has produced results which have exceeded community expectations in many cases. Certainly the outcomes for some of those heritage projects that I'm thinking of, some of those community facilities as well, the fact that we were able to save some of those and give them a new lease on life has been a real credit to the programme of work that you and the team have run and have been part of. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you.